Aloha and welcome to today's presentation, another episode of Ancient Oblivion. I'm pretty excited for today's episode. We're going to be talking about vanished in the Dark Ages, specifically those cultures and tribes and civilizations that seem to have just up and disappeared during this strange time known as the Dark Ages, which I've been researching a lot lately. And at the end of this presentation, I'll share a bit more about my brand new book that I've written called Ancient Oblivion, Return to Hyperborea, which is part 2 in a series called Ancient Oblivion. I'm JayDreamerZ. Nice to see everybody. Good to see everyone in the chat today. Let's check this out. So you may have heard of, some of the more popular ones, like the Mayan, right? The Mayan or the Anasazi. Civilizations, tribes that seem to just have packed up and left. They left their megalithic structures, they left their huge cities, completely abandoning their environment, their home, and places that they oftentimes put a lot of effort and work into sustaining and making it a thriving civilization. They just seem to have disappeared. Now, the time frames in which these civilizations have disappeared is of great interest to me personally. So that's what we're going to be focusing on today. Keep in mind, these are not the only ones. This is just going to be a small list of those civilizations that are said to have disappeared, not just during the Dark Ages, but across time. It's interesting because many of these line up during the period called the Dark Ages. And then if you go back another 1,000 years, there's another mass disappearance of civilizations across the world. So I'm going to get some notes pulled up here, and we're going to begin with the Anasazi. We're going to be speaking about a tribe, Native American tribe, known as the Anasazi. So it says here, that the Anasazi were the ancestral Puebloans, and they disappeared from the Four Corners region, as you can see here in the United States. This is actually where I live, up here in Colorado, in this area, in this region. So Colorado, Utah, Arizona, and New Mexico. And the Anasazi were said to have been cliff dwellers that set up camp in this particular area. Now, they're not the only ones that are of particular interest to me. I love all of the Native American stories, especially that of the Navajo and the Hopi and their creation myths and legends, which ultimately are tied into the destruction or the end of the world scenarios, myths and legends, one and the same. But yeah, they were established, and suddenly they disappeared. Let's take a look now. You might also be familiar with this particular area because it's home to a lot of really interesting megaliths, right? Megaliths and just national parks and strange rock formations. Obviously, you have the Grand Canyon, things like the Petrified Forest down in Arizona. You've got various national parks up in Utah that have strange arches and weird rock formations that to me look petrified, right? For example, this one right here, this is from the Four Corners area, and it looks as if the earth had been, to me at least, it looks as if the earth had been electrically pulled up or attracted, that there was an attractor in the sky, which I believe is electricity. And that electricity comes down. It's negatively charged, and the closer it gets to the positively charged muddy earth during these apocalyptic cycles, that mud lifts up into the air, attracted to the strong negative electronic force that's just above it. And then whenever the two connect, they petrify it. That charge runs through it. The most dense area of these rock formations, you'll notice, is often at the top. We would think that if this was, over time, that the denser structure would be at the bottom, but it's not. It's oftentimes actually at the top, and then the further down you go, the less dense it really is and the more it turns into soil. And I believe that's because the electricity petrifies at the point of impact, or the point where that circuit connects, and then it travels all the way down, dissipating as it goes. So this is the area where the Anasazi set up shop, here in the Four Corners. Now, in my new book, and I also mentioned this in Ancient Oblivion, the Plasma Apocalypse, but in Return to Hyperborea, I have chapters dedicated to these lost tribes. Various lost tribes across time and across history. They're referenced by many cultures. Some of the most famous ones, or at least one of the most famous one is the lost tribes of Israel, right? The 10 lost tribes of Israel. And I have a theory, and my research has indicated to me so far that there have been these lost tribes that emerged from the earth at a center place, at a center point, and that something happened in that center point, in that place. There's these cataclysms that befall our world, and sometimes they force these tribes to go inward towards a place of safety, towards the middle. And then other times they force them out of that place to go and repopulate the rest of the world and scatter to the four winds. So here you see the symbol for the Four Corners area. This is where the four states connect. So people go here and they put their hands and their feet there and they can say they've stood in all four states. But also it's symbolic of paradise, which I believe that many of these tribes were looking for. Actually, I believe every tribe continued throughout the years, at least those who had the knowledge, they continued to look for home, to seek after paradise. They wanted to return to Hyperborea, to Eden, to the land of creation, to the place where it all started. And this is what that land looks like. It's 4 quadrants. It's a circular island at the North Pole with Mount Meru, a plasma volcano, and opening into the hollow recesses of our world right there in the middle. So I think it's interesting that the Anasazi settled in an area symbolically as the Four Corners, which also symbolically represents paradise, right? If you listen to the Hopi tribe and you listen to the Aztecs, they all were told to follow signs when they were nomadic. And when they saw a sign, a particular sign in the sky, lights in the sky basically, that's how they would know where to settle down. Sometimes that sign was a kachina that pointed the way, or sometimes that sign was a cosmic cactus or a tree of some sort. And these are the lights that we see in the skies. Now, the Anasazi settled in these areas and built cliff dwellings, which is very much reminiscent of a movie that is one of my favorites that I'll have to break down soon, called Time Machine by H.G. Wells. In the movie Time Machine, a man from the 1800s builds a time machine because his fiancée is murdered and he wants to go back in time to save her. But he accidentally ends up going so far into the future that it looks like he's in the ancient past. It looks like he's traveled into the Stone Age. And if you watch the movie, you can see that the people in that distant future are cliff dwellers, just like the Anasazi and many other tribes from across the world. Why did they build these cliffs, dwellings? Why live inside of a cliff, inside of a wall? What's the reason for that? Many would just say it's protection from, I don't know. I mean, there weren't a lot of people around. Like, the United States wasn't as populated back then. So, my theory is that there are creatures called phantazoids. You could just simply call them monsters. Some are benevolent. Some will eat you. Some are predatory. Others are neutral. But our world goes through these influxes of creatures, where various creatures from beneath and above and on the surface all meet together at one time when the doors of our world, when the portals open. And when those portals open, otherworldly creatures come into this world, flooding it. Gigantic in stature, in size, in strength, and they look hideous if you've never seen one before. So I believe that they built their homes into these cliffs for that particular reason, to protect themselves against what I call phantazoids. Over time, those phantazoids die out, and they're hunted down, and we learn their weaknesses. But I believe this is also the exact same reason why they build other protective barriers like the Great Wall of China. I am not convinced that when the Great Wall of China was initially built and erected, that there was such a population that they needed 1,000 years and this huge undertaking, spending vast amounts of money, manpower, labor, energy, time, just to keep out a few nomadic tribes. That doesn't make sense to me. What does make sense is if our world was overran with monsters, actual monsters, that you would want to keep them out. Anyways, so if we get back to this Four Corners area, you can see structures like this, right? This is Monument Valley. And you can see, this is my theory on these mesas and whatnot, is that this is where the electricity comes down in these particular points. This is where the thunderbolts of the gods touches the muddy earth. And you notice it's all red in color too. That orangey red post-apocalyptic color. There's a reason why those post-apocalyptic movies have that sort of a filter to them. That rusty looking filter. It's because, I believe, when we go through an electromagnetic reversal, all of the oxygen within the earth bursts outward, electrifying, ionizing, and it fills our world. So what you're seeing here is oxidation. The surface world becomes oxidized. So do the dirt and the mud and all of this stuff. This used to be mud, all of this. This was clay, mud, silt, debris, and whatnot. And then the electricity came down, lifted it up on these particular points. That's why it's flat on top, because that's the point of impact. Boom. And it flattens it out. And then the rest of the debris just falls down off to the sides. But that's why you have these towers jutting up out of the ground. Unless you'd like to believe the modern academic version that says the land was all up here at one point, and then it just eroded and went down there for some reason. Right? So here they are. I've got these here in Colorado as well. I've done a video on my members only. You can check out my visit to the cliff dwellings here in Colorado, up in Manitou Springs, actually. I might go back there soon as well. Anyway, they built all of these interesting structures on the faces of these rocks, on the side of these huge cliffs. This isn't the only lost civilization that you're going to hear about today that does this. How interesting. This harkens back to another time. These people live in an otherworldly environment. When we take a look at this is a photograph. This is a Polaroid of the past. This is something that has been forgotten. This is something that modern academics and most people take for granted or are just simply ignorant of. When they see landscapes like this that the ancient Anasazi lived in, under an electrically charged environment. Now they all up and left at some point in time in a world that was electrically charged. Now I'll tell you, and I'll share this throughout the presentation, my theory on all of these tribes disappearing, at least many of them. It's for the same reason that they left their home and they went somewhere else, and then they were told, look for a sign, and that's how you'll know where to settle. They're always looking for home. So when they see the signs reemerge in the form of these cosmic configurations in the sky, they leave. They're ready. The ancients, the people in charge, the people who know their true history, they would pack up and go. If I told you where paradise was, that it's accessible, and that you could go right now, leave this crazy, messed up world behind, take a few necessities with you, you can get there safely. I told you exactly how to go. Don't you think there would be many people that would just grab a couple things and be on their way? I do. So, these people built their homes into the side of these cliffs during a time when the world was electrically charged. It was a time of magic and wonder and intrigue and mystery and mysticism. It was something that's it's crazy because it's basically just been hid from the modern world. From nobody wants to teach us about this time. They want to keep this to a realm of fiction and fantasy, and oh, that was just protection from rain, or I don't know. They make up all kinds of other examples of these people. Now this is interesting. Here's some Anasazi petroglyphs. I want to examine these for just a moment, and I'd like to talk about these petroglyphs. There's many tribes across the world, some missing, some gone, some vanished, some not, but many across the world have left similar petroglyphs, similar shapes, similar figures. Modern academics would just say that they were childish, that they had a childish mindset, that they were cavemen, that they were Cro-Magnon or troglodytes, that they had no real intellect, and so this was them being bored. Basically, that's what I get out of it, at least. However, when I look, I see something else entirely. When I look, I see sky figurines. I see cosmic configurations. I see plasma in the air. And I see these cultures the world across having looked up during times when there were all of the gods, all of the mighty ones, all of the angels, all of the demons, and whatever words, people used descriptively across time. They were in the air. They were all over the place. They were wondrous to behold. They were fantastic. And people were amazed, especially the people that had already survived, that prior cataclysm. And they went outside and they would draw it right there in the stone while they're looking at it, facing it. So, for example, let's check these two out right here, right? You'll notice that there's a couple of what look like stick figures. Now, this one right here, the stick figure body goes all the way down through its legs. That's not a person. That's not a human. I can't be led to believe that people didn't understand how to draw other humans, especially when we have cave paintings that accurately depict the anatomy of various animals and people going back even further in time than when these were made. People knew what others looked like. A human doesn't have this. It's also not a male genitalia or anything of the sort. This is a plasma discharge, terrestrial plasma discharge. I talk about the anode and the cathode islands off to either side of Mount Meru. They have their own little blasts that shoot up. They're compelled towards each other. They're attracted to one another. This is also the area of paradise down here, the legs. I'm specifically talking about the legs of this cosmic stick figure. Mount Meru is the beam in the middle that shoots straight up into the heavens. Now, as it gets closer to the heavens, it branches out off to the sides, creating a world tree, creating a savior tied to a tree or hung on a cross. It creates a thunderbird with wings spread out and feathers of aurora dripping down off of those wings. Sometimes the arms are depicted as up, sometimes arms are depicted as down, but this is what I'm seeing when I look at this. Now, this right here is also very interesting. People can interpret this in many different ways. I'll share mine with you. This is the tree of life. This is one of the many forms that this over here can take. When this beam of light, terrestrial beam of light, first shoots out of the earth, it's just a beam because it's plasma and it's effectively a laser that shoots up out of the ground as a focused line of energy. But when that plasma interacts with the atmosphere, which is a fluid, just like plasma is, then it starts to take shape and change shape. It's a shapeshifter. So this is one of the shapes that it takes. We've got the anode shooting up, boom, the cathode shooting up, and then Mount Meru in the middle, and then we have these little toroidal fields that make their way across. This is known as Jacob's ladder. It's also the tree of life. I'll show you here in a second. It's been depicted across cultures and across time. Up here we have these spirals. This is remnants from the world storm. Oh, I better check to make sure the audio is good. Hold on, I haven't looked at the chat. Okay, looks good. Looks like we're good. All right, cool. Let me jump back in the presentation. So you'll see lots of these spirals, these spiral formations, right? It's not because they liked hypnotizing people or anything. It's because when the world's atmosphere depressurizes, it creates a world storm. It's just like pulling the plug on the bathtub or the sink, and the water is compelled in one direction. It wants to go in one direction. It's not just chaotic all over the place. The fluid that we live in called atmosphere also does the same thing. When we pull the plug that's up there in the sky, called the firmament, and a hole bursts forth from it, our atmosphere seeps out, and it starts to spin and spin and spin following the jet stream. And the plasma that comes in from above also starts to spin and spin and spin because it's being influenced by those same winds. So people see this up there in the sky. They see spirals. It depends on your perspective also. There's other shapes that plasma can take, other forms, other figures. But this is what the Anasazi saw, something like this, and they drew it on the rock formations. They drew the portion of the sky that they witnessed, that they could actually see the physical portion of the sky. They drew the stick figure. Let's see. Here's some other examples of the same petroglyphs from across the world, from Arizona to Armenia to Guyana, New Mexico, Spain, Tucson, the Alps, United Arab Emirates, Italy, Venezuela. The list goes on and on. Now notice many times when you see this sort of stick figure drawing, just like that of the Anasazi, sometimes you'll notice that they put these two dots on either side, right? This one right here is Janus. You can see the two faces, right? One face on one side, one face on the other. They put these two little dots underneath the armpits of this stick figure, usually raising its hands, which is also a symbol for peace. Because when you see that beam shoot up into the sky, that's the time for prosperity, when the world is filled with energy. But you see these two little dots underneath, right? Those are little toroidal instabilities. They're little plasma balls, basically, that form around. It's a part of a toroidal field that actually wraps around, creating those rings that go all the way up, right? We see them from different angles. But that's also seen, like I said, not only across the world and not just in petroglyphs, but you see this in totem poles. The totem poles of various tribes, especially across the United States. You see something that looks similar to this. When you open your mind and you use your imagination a little, you can see where the totem pole comes from. You've got all of these different things that are happening with electricity and stuff going all the way up to the top, where eventually they will place a thunderbird or a phoenix. And they'll put those same two little balls, those little circles, on those totem poles on either side. Now, this is basically the beam of energy that shoots up, the terrestrial beam of energy that shoots up to the heavens, branching out at the sides. This is the Irminsul of the Anglo-Saxons. It's the world tree of the Norse, Yggdrasil, etc. And then at the top, when they place a head there, right, oftentimes with little horns or a crescent, an upside-down crescent that goes like that, that little head, that head up at the top is not a part of this same structure. This beam of plasma splits right here where you see the wings. Up here is the depressurization point, which is cartoonified as a head. Sometimes it's drawn as the head of a bird. Sometimes it's drawn as the head of Medusa or other things. And this is, let's go back to this too. This is the like Sumerian tree of life, as I was discussing earlier. Let me show you that same glyph right there in the middle. You see that? Right there. Now let's take a look at the Sumerian version of the Tree of Life. See that? That's the exact same thing. These two on either side, these are not actual aliens that had faces of birds. Hey, Kim. What's up, Kim? Kim Tanner just joined my channel. Subscribe to my channel. That's awesome. Well, thank you, Kim. So these are not aliens that came down. These are not people. They may be symbolic of a time when there were aliens and when there were giants and people, other extraterrestrials. But no, these are plasma formations on either side. This is an anode. This is a cathode. These are the two witnesses, the two lampstands, the two holy mountains on either side of Mount Meru. This in the middle is a column, as you can see, blossoming. It's the tree of life. This is the axis mundi. And then you have all this electrical phenomenon on either side of it. That's all electricity. Pardon me. Here it is again. Ancient Sumerian, Babylonian era. The tree of life, right there in the middle. Now, you wouldn't think the tree of life would be like that tall. If these were actual people, it would be a gigantic tree. I mean, it stands to reason. It would be the tree of all trees. And then, just like we talked about, there's the Thunderbird at the top. People often think that this is some sort of a craft, especially Ancient Aliens style people. I love that show, but I have another theory about this. I don't believe that this is a craft. I believe this is the depressurization point in the sky above. Francesca! Hey, what's up, Francesca? Thanks for joining my channel, subscribing. This right here is the depressurization point. Directly above that terrestrial beam of energy that shoots up, that is a hole in the sky. This is where it branches out and creates the wings of the Thunderbird. And the reason you see a person in there is because this is the Sipapu, as described by, various Native American cultures. It's a transition point. It's the place where extraterrestrials from outside of our world, out there in space, can enter into our world when that inverted dome up there blows out and opens up during the depressurization. Here it is again. You can see the electricity coming off of it to either side. It looks electrical to me when you look at it through that, with that mindset. Here's the hole in the sky that opens up once more. And now let's switch gears from the Anasazi to the Mayans. The Mayans were a pretty big deal back in 2012. I remember clearly. Everyone in the conspiracy world was doomsaying. Everyone was predicting the end of the world. By the way, let me just point this out. This right here, this little face, this is the Mayan calendar. They say this is the Mayan calendar. There's a huge circle right there in the middle with a figure's face sticking their tongue out, right? That's this up here. This exact same thing up here that people witnessed in the sky is this central point in the Mayan calendar, right? With different symbolic elements included in it. But this is called the Aegis of Zeus. This is an inverted dome at the top of the world, or the firmament, I should say, that faces us, the eye in the sky, made out of glass, hard substance. The ancients said things like rock or stone, but I believe it's actually ice, which was called stone. It was a type of stone. The ancients would consider it a type of stone. It's a hardened substance. So anyways, this is the Mayan calendar. The Mayans also just seem to have suddenly vanished during the Dark Ages, or also affectionately known as the Middle Ages, right? Academics likes to separate the portions of the Middle Ages, but basically it's a 1,000-year period, approximately between 500 AD and 1500 AD, but give or take, right? Anyways, this is their calendar. That's basically the sky, which is the original calendar, right? We were given signs, luminaries, lights in the heavens that move just like a clock that we could keep track of so that we could know the appointed times or events that would take place beneath that clock. And the wise men of ancient times recorded those movements and took them very seriously because they knew that they led to important events. They could predict important events. They could prepare for apocalypses and cataclysms the world across. The Mayans knew this. They were no fools. Oh, Howard in the chat He says, I have the Mayan calendar on my keychain. I'm in Mexico now. That's cool. They watched the skies, and the legends seem to indicate that they suddenly disappeared, vanished in the Dark Ages, without a trace. Now, my theory is that this is the time when those lights shot up into the heavens. We went through an electromagnetic polarity shift, or a pole reversal, or an electromagnetic reversal, where energy shoots up out of the earth, forming these pillars, forming these signs, these omens, that were indicative to the wise that it was time to go home. And when the people saw these poles and pillars of light shooting up out of the earth, they looked for the biggest one that touched the heavens. And they went there. They dropped everything and they went there. Now, if they had the technology, as we do today, or as some of humanity does today, a very small portion of it, this is also the time when you could leave the earth. If there's a hole that opens up in the firmament of whatever size, you could feasibly escape in a rocket. You could blast off. Why? Because if there's less pressure, if the atmosphere seeps out through the heavens, that would increase buoyancy. And it would be much easier to actually escape if you have the proper protective gear. You could get out of this world. You could become a slider. You could play cosmic chutes and ladders, and you can go from world to world, especially if you're not really satisfied with this one and the status quo and how things are going. You can leave and go check out other alternate Earths. And the Mayan have interesting pictures just like this. What seems to be this Mayan guy that's inside of a contraption. It looks like a rocket, basically, right? That's what many people believe. This looks like there's actually fire shooting out of the back right here, and it goes off and it's pointed at the top. There's some kind of levers he's possibly holding on to. His foot is like right there attached to some piece of equipment, possibly. This is extremely interesting. Did some humans have the technology to leave our world? Antiquitech, ancient technology, antique technology that has been hidden or lost, right? Many of these things are lost, I believe, not just because the governments of the world don't want them, their people to know about it, so they go and just cover up every little detail across the world. That's quite an undertaking. Nature can do that, though. Nature is quite capable of creating mud to come up from the ground and sink all of that technology back down into the earth, swallowing it up, or increasing the buoyancy in the atmosphere around us and allowing those objects to float up and out of this world, dispensing of them. So it's quite possible that ancient people have been to the, I don't want to say to the stars, but have been to the heavens at the very least. Ken just donated. Hey, what's up, Ken? Good to see you. Ken Albert just donated 5 memberships, channel memberships. I've got some special videos for members only. You guys can go check those out now. It's a good time. Now, let's look at some more parts of the Mayan civilization. Specifically, let's look at this pyramid and the many pyramids that were created around these same 1,000-year periods. The same 1,000-year periods that we see coinciding with these mass disappearances of civilization after civilization, tribe after tribe, culture after culture. Now, these are what I call places of power. And I'll explain that. These places where these pyramids are built. Well, first let's start with the word pyramid. It means fire or light inside. Pyr means, or fir means fire or light. Originally it meant light, but by extension it means fire, right? And then amid just means inside of or in between. So fire on the inside, pyramids, light. Light on the inside. I theorize, and I talk about this in my new book, These Places of Power. And I also have chapters in my new book, Return to Hyperborea, Which, by the way, is debuting in about a week. So keep your eyes out. I talk about in one of my chapters, I talk about the origin, the very first of the cities. Why they were called cities, what defined a city, how people began cities. I don't think it was just random people getting together and just setting up shop and building together or whatnot. There was a reason, there was a thing, there was a substance of value that brought them to that place. These pyramids are built on top of caves. They're built on top of cavernous systems that go so deep down inside of the earth that they reach down into those places where the oxygen is ionized and it rushes all throughout those cavernous systems, and then it comes up right here. And so many people, the wise at least, tried to contain it. Instead of just letting it release all into the atmosphere, they built containment systems or containment units to trap the ghosts, if you want to see it that way, to use a Ghostbusters analogy. But they would build these contained structures that were designed according to frequency and cymatics, and they work best with that electric force. And then they would hold these rituals in these places in order to extend life. They would extend life. It's all been flipped upside down on its head these days, with modern academics trying to make the people of the ancient world. I'm getting hot, so I gotta take this off. The people of the ancient world just look like savages. Like they were just all murderers, all savages. They just, they had no intellect to them. I believe they had purpose to them. I believe they had reason behind their sacrifices that they would perform on top of these structures or within these structures. It's not like they were up here on the roof or anything. But anyways, these are places of power. Places designed just like modern day cathedrals that are built on top of catacombs and openings within the earth. These are places where energy came up out of the earth and the light would burst up through the halls of this place. All of these pyramids, or many of them at least. And these were usually considered to be like temples or houses for nobility, because the people who settled, this was the center of the city. This is what dictates the polises or the metropolises or metropolises. This is what dictates the exact center of these places, just as this is a small version of Mount Meru at the center of our world, which dictates the middle, the gathering place of our world. Now, this place is called Chichen Itza, or you could say Chichen Itza, however you want to pronounce it. It's fine with me. Pronunciations are strange, fun, and interesting things over time. They're not very concrete because people are not very concrete, and they eventually warp things and they become lazy, basically. So our language changes very quickly, as it is today. Now, Chichen Itza. This is very interesting. Just the word. It's actually k. It's a h. This is the root for chicken. That's chicken. That's the word chicken. Okay. It's also the root of like chocolate and some other words too. But it's vowels were not super important the further back we go in time, so we focus on the ch and the ch. It's a repetitive ch sound, which is a ch, which in the ancient world is the letter het. Let me show you real quick. So this is the letter het in ancient Hebrew and Phoenician. Het was where we get our modern letter H from, actually. So it was originally shown as, this was more on its side. This glyph right here isn't 100% accurate because this is like a vertical version, but it was more horizontal back then. So it looked like the Roman numeral 3, which is appropriate. It was actually the sky, the ground, and then 3 beams of light. The 2 beams off to the side, those were known as the Pillars of Hercules. The middle beam, that was the beam from Mount Meru. It was the Tree of Life. Those outer 2 beams The pillars of Hercules, those were the boundary markers of the known world. If you go past those or beyond those or into those, you will leave the world that you once knew, because you're going to paradise. You're going to a land that is electrically charged, that is energetically amplified, and the conditions for life are so vastly different from anything that you've ever known that it's like you're leaving Earth and going into other wonderland, basically, right? Anyways, this ended up being turned on its side. So it's the letter H. It evolved into the letter H. It's also the number 8, which is why this glyph version of it, these are all the same glyph, chet, chet, chet. This one looks like the number 8. It is the 8th letter of the Phoenician and Paleo-Hebrew alphabets. That's why if you have 8 and another 8, right, that can also represent time travel or seeming time travel. It seems like you've traveled through time and you're in the land of the lost. You're in a different place now because you've gone past between the two 8s, the two chets, the pillars of Hercules. It meant literally a fence or a boundary, specifically an outdoor boundary. So 2 outdoor boundaries. Now we get back to the name of the pyramid, chet, chet on, which means of the outdoor boundaries, or from between those who are of the land between the outdoor boundaries, right? I mean, there's many different ways to translate words, but that's mine. So Chichen Itza. Let me just read this. One of the new 7 wonders of the world. The tallest temple is this pyramid called Kukulkan. I'm going to talk about Kukulkan in a minute. The biggest building on the site. The spring and the autumn equinoxes awaken the 10-story serpent that slithers down El Castillo. I'll show you that in a minute as well. But I want to point out how important it was for the ancients to watch and observe the midpoints in our seasons, the 4 seasons, the solstices and the equinoxes. Those are what all of the holy days, every single one of them, are all about. Every one of them. And it's not all symbolic as you might think, like, oh, we're just celebrating, the time when the flowers grow, or we're celebrating, hoping that the snow goes away or whatever. That's an oversimplification of all of the holidays. The holidays are holy days, days of fear. People weren't afraid, like, oh no, the flowers are growing. No. The people were afraid ghosts would return. The spirits of the dead would rise up. That serpents, wonderful, strange, and mighty, would float down from the heavens and descend to petrify, eat, and change the shape of the earth and people and other many wonderful things. Some destructive, some creative. But it's much deeper and more complex and more meaningful and valuable than just celebrating snow or grass growing or, whatever ways people like to look at the quote-unquote pagan holidays. So here we have Kukulkan. Now, here you have the same exact lettering. You can kind of see it up here. Let me bring it down a bit. Oh, can I? Let me see. So, ko. I will point out there's 3 Ks there, right? That's also symbolic, but I'm not going to go down that road right now. The K is 11. It's the 11th letter in our alphabet. So 11, 11, 11. Boom. But we have a repetition of the same ch sound, just like in the place name there. So, koko, kuku, chocolate, right? Chicken, chakaon, kakaon, lake tite, kaka, or kaka, or however you want to say it. That's the chet. That harkens right back to the 2 8s, the 2 boundaries, the pillars of Hercules. That's what that has to do with. And the Khan at the end is a word that means priest or servant of the gods, or someone that attends to a god, a priest, basically, a wise man, a wizard. Kukulkan, or Kukulkan, basically. Kukulkan. Now, let's check this out. During the spring and autumnal equinoxes, a staircase at Chichen Itza casts a shadow shaped like a feathered serpent deity, which is Kukulkan. Kukulkan is a winged serpent, not snake. It's a huge difference. A winged serpent, right? Which I interpret as plasma that's undulating from the heavens way up there. Massive tentacles of plasma. I don't know another word right now, but huge ropes of electricity that just, they're so massive and so far away that they appear to be moving in slow motion way up there in the heavens. But if you were really close to them, you'd see how quickly they're actually moving. And they're feathered. The feathered part is, I mean, you can look at the Aurora Borealis, and you can see this. It does the exact same thing as a feathered serpent. It's a serpent at first, very solid in structure, but then whenever it hits a current, or whenever the wind just blows on it strong enough, it just creates a feathery aurora that branches off of it. This is the feathered serpent, which is the equivalent of the Aztec god Quetzalcoatl, which means feathered serpent, which is the ATL right there, means serpent. Co means like, or serpent-like, serpentine-like, right? So ATL, that's the root of Atlantis, Atlantis, Atlanta, many other words that start with ATL or have ATL in them. The Chichen Itza pyramid in present-day Mexico was dedicated to his cult, the cult of the feathered serpent. Now, at the equinox, the shadow would be cast. I'll show you a better picture of it here. Let me see if I have a better picture. There it is. The snake of sunlight. So as you can see, these steps, right? I also believe that there were giants back then, right? So it's possible that these are just small steps for survivors, which are the small humans, and these are giant steps for actual giants, possibly. But anyways, as you can see, it creates this sort of undulating shadow deal or light with the head of the serpent down here at the bottom. This is what they worshipped. They saw this as life, the source of life, which is what it is. It's electricity, it's electromagnetism, it's plasma, it's spirit, it's sentient spirit. Kukulkan, so the people during the time of magic, the Dark Ages, which was actually a time when the whole sky was lit up. You read the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles, oh my God. They talk about all these crazy things happening up there in the heavens. And you can read, the annals of the Japanese, the ancient Japanese. They talk about the same thing. All cultures across the world during this time dubbed the Dark Ages. Why is it called Dark Ages? Because we're in the dark about it. Not because it was dark, not because, we're missing... we're just, they didn't have much information. No, their information they had was destroyed in cataclysms, right? It's hard to keep paper around and write things in a world that's electrically amplified. It's easy, things can easily catch on fire, and there's monsters running about, mythic creatures, legendary creatures all over the place that people have to hide from, dragons and whatnot. So, the priest of Kukulkan. All right, let's continue on. Here's actually, let's continue on with this line of thought. Now, in the Mayan, they have this glyph right here quite often, and you might just think, oh, that's just depicting how hard they worked, this person carrying this load on their back or whatever, but it's not. This is not depicting something that they did as a civilization. This is depicting something they saw, which was Atlas or Atl Os, the strong serpent, the powerful serpent, which is the terrestrial serpent that shot up out of the ground, being that beam of energy from Mount Meru at the center of the world, right? Spreading its arms out just underneath that inverted dome above, appearing to hold an entire world, or if you see it as a face, as the Aztec did, then you draw it carrying a face on its back. This is the Squatter Man. This is the Mayan version of the Squatter Man plasma configuration. Now, we continue on to the Olmec. The Olmec, just before them, actually. The Olmec are another mysterious and enigmatic tribe and civilization, advanced civilization, as many of them were, that just up and left. And no one knows why. Nobody knows why. All these cultures just decided, we're all going to leave right now with haste. Grab your stuff. I can think of the best reason in the world, but that's my perspective. Now, obviously, there's like the stone heads. We'll talk about those in a minute. But did you know that the word Olmec means rubber people? Yeah. It actually means rubber people. So, could this actually be about people made out of rubber? Or people that appear to be rubbery, like bendy, double jointed and stuff? I talk about how, the plasma apocalypse, when the plasma comes down, how it affects humans and it mutates various tribes of humans, all in different ways across the world, depending upon your diet, your culture, your atmosphere, your surroundings, your environment. People are quickly mutated. All that junk DNA switches on and your body is like, okay, let's do it. Let's perfect you real quick. So your cells are reprogrammed by the plasma. One of those things is that with all of the electrical stimulation, or the electricity in the air, that stimulates people's collagen and elastin production within their skin, which is why it seems like there's this fountain of youth that keeps people's skin stretchy and young looking and whatnot. But it also has another effect, which is because you have an increased elastin production in your skin becomes elastic, just like a baby. Kids can bend their arms and stuff and their hands and fingers, all kinds of crazy ways that make adults cringe, oftentimes. My son just recently did that. He said, "Dad, watch this." I was like, oh my God. But that's because they're fresh, Their skin is still producing. They're at their prime. Their skin's producing. The electricity is fresh inside of them and strong inside of them. They're strong with spirit. Anyways, the rubber people. Or could it be because they wore rubber to keep electricity off of them, to protect them? Rubber suits, possibly rubber helmets or something, to protect them from an electrically charged environment that seemed to be the world across. Medieval times, the Dark Ages. Over in Europe, I don't know if they knew about rubber yet, or knew how to make it, or had access to making a bunch of it, but they did make metal, and they had their explorers put on these huge metal Faraday cages called heavy armor. It's armor against ghosts or electricity. To me, ghosts are just electricity, but it's not armor to fight anybody. Like, I feel I've proven that, but whatever. I mean, it's history's proven it. Just, what do they call that? Common sense proves that. The knights of medieval lore definitely did not originally use their armor to, go to war and fight people. Sure, they jousted and did sports and stuff, but... Alright, so let's get back to the Olmecs. Now, the Olmecs are most notable for having left behind these gigantic heads, stone carvings, right? This is reminiscent of the Rapa Nui of Easter Island, right? Remember that word Rapa, right? It means healer, to heal. This is a time and an age of healing. The Dark Ages, right? That was a time when the world was so full of energy that people lived much longer, as opposed to contrary opinion, which is that, we're taught when we think about the Middle Ages or the Dark Ages, we're led to believe that people live to be about 25. I don't think so. Matter of fact, the more I study, especially given all the crazy devices that were used in medieval England to torture people because they could not kill them. They had to chop their head off to kill some of these saints and witches and whatnot. These wizards and people of power, people imbued with power, or people who come from a place of power. So the the Olmec heads are gigantic, right? And they have these interesting. This almost looks like a sentinel out of the X-Men cartoons. This is something that looks so fantastic. It harkens back to a time where fantasy was reality, where fiction was fact. They have this special gear that they all put on. At least that's how they're depicted. And these heads are gigantic. I believe humans were gigantic at the time. Humongous. That titans did exist. That humans grew and grew and grew as the atmosphere had depressurized and the buoyancy had increased and people just became much larger. The survivors did not. Those who made it through that transitional period, their children grew larger and larger and larger, but they didn't. Now, you'll also find it interesting of note, as I did, that many of these Olmec heads were buried underground, or sank, I should say. I don't believe they were buried. Why would anybody do that, right? On Easter Island. Man, forever, everybody thought that Easter Island heads were just heads. They're just statues. They're at weird angles, and, sometimes they kind of buried them a little or whatever. No. Come to find out, their entire bodies and only the heads are sticking up out of the ground due to liquefaction, which is the earth shaking so quickly that objects on the top sink down. Heavy objects, denser objects sink down. Just like these. Just like these heads made of stone. Huge, dense objects at a time whenever the surface becomes swamp-like and muddy, they all start to sink down. No wonder the Olmec took off. No wonder the Maya took off or the Anasazi took off. They probably had no desire to just stay in the Southlands, which is where we all live right now, but they wanted to go home to the place of safety, to Yggdrasil, to the World Tree, to Mount Meru, to Paradise, to Hyperborea. So they left. And everything they left succumbed, or succumb, is it succumb? I don't know. Was affected by the apocalypse. Yes, Dr. Bob's Nightmare, you're correct. The Olmecs had magnetic compasses, you're right. And I believe that they, knew how to use those magnetic compasses. I like looking in the chat and just seeing, people adding a little drop in knowledge. I like that. So here's some ancient pictures. As you can see, this one's in a huge ditch, right? Because they had to dig this out. They dug all these, or many of them, out of the ground. They just sank down into the ground. Huge, right? This is the whole mud flood theory, right? There was a mud flood, all right? The world was flooded with mud, or it became mud, okay? It's not like mud dropped out of the sky and just flooded everything. The world, it's actually the reverse. The water rose up. When you have liquefaction on the earth, the water rises up to the surface and all the loose parts drop down and it becomes very soupy and muddy and they all mix together. And then it allows for heavy objects to fall down and other objects that are already buried, they'll actually rise up due to the liquefaction, due to the vibrations in the earth. So this is where we find our relics. Right? This is where we find evidence of a time of fantasy and fiction when it was fact. Now we switch gears to the Nabateans. The Nabateans. Now, this is over in the Middle East, in the area known as Jordan, specifically. These people carved their houses. These were also cliff dwellers, effectively. They're cliff dwellers. They lived on and inside of cliffs. They carved intricate houses, temples, treasuries, and whatnot into the sides of rocks. Or did they, actually? Did they? Isn't that quite also an undertaking? Right? All these ancient civilizations that just intricately carved, pure rock? I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm saying perhaps the conditions were different back when that was not pure rock, when it wasn't as dense as it grows to be over time due to increase in pressure. You know, once the dome is sealed up and the pressure increases and stuff, increase in temperature and heat and other things. I believe that that was a big block of clay, actually. I'm more inclined to believe that stuff like structures like that. Indiana Jones comes to mind for about 80 people in the chat right now. That was clay to me. I'm convinced. I mean, nobody can. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to say nobody can convince me otherwise, but it seems very reasonable to me that at a time of liquefaction, earthquakes, clay being mixed up and whatnot, and then the earth lifting up into the heavens. Kai, what's up, Kai? Welcome to my channel. Thanks for subscribing, Kai. Anyways, I believe that was all clay. That was much more loose. It wasn't as dense in times before, so they just shaped it. They shaped it, and then they allowed the electricity and the atmosphere and the environment to do the work to harden it. They were working with nature, right? Now, this is an interesting place. Petra. What Petra means rock, actually. Peter, right? Or father, Peter, Pedro. Peter in the Bible, upon this rock I will build my church, because Peter means rock, or Petra means rock. So this is a city built within the rock. To get here, this is actually built in a crevice, okay? All this is a crack in the ground. This ground opened up. Remember, the world's shaking and stuff. Everything's very liquidy and clay-like. You know what I mean? All the earth is very wet. So the ground opens up. Big, huge crack. These people go down in there, and they're trying to hide from monsters, from phantazoids, otherworldly creatures, giants, and other things as well, right? The world's a very dangerous place. I mean, we have our extremes. We live in dangerous times now as well, if your eyes are open to that. But the world of magic also has its own dangers. Anyways, the world opens up. This is all clay form. They go and carve it out and whatnot. Man, I don't need the Indiana Jones song like so bad right now. This is from Indiana. So they filmed Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade right here, okay? Which is appropriate if this is a place of power. If this is one of those places that has cavernous systems underneath it, then this is a place where the Holy Grail would be. Because the Holy Grail is what, you know, rejuvenates cellular regeneration, or your cellular structure. I have to adjust. Sorry. One sec. All right. So this place was carved into the walls. These are cliff dwellers. Now, modern academics will have you believe that these were Arabs. Were they? Let's check this out. Now, before I get to the Arab thing, look at the protection factor. Only people and like horses could fit through here. And if anyone did charge through, like an army of monsters or an army of anything, it's much easier to protect all of that on the inside when they're forced through that tiny little space. Much like in the movie 300, or, you know, the historic event that the movie's based off of, with Sparta and whatnot. Now let's take a look at this structure. There's many of these. This particular one's probably the most famous because of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. This is known as the Treasury. I would love to visit this someday. I want to take a closer look at the Treasury, though. Is this really Middle Eastern? Was this really made by, like, Arabs? Let's take a closer look at this. I'm going to zoom in. Oops, I gave it away. Let's take a closer look. Now, first things first. See at the top of that little roof, there's this triangle. Underneath that roof, there are these pillars and columns. And then we have a gigantic door, like a huge door for giants because, you know, giants lived back then. But anyways, and then we have horses on either side. I'm going to come back to those in a minute. This is called neoclassical architecture. It's a mix of Greco-Roman, Greek and Roman together. This building, the White House, is this building. They're the same. They're the exact same. This is not Arab. Okay. This is not at all. All right. Now, some people, naysayers and whatnot, they might argue and say, well, the Romans eventually took it over, you know, in the first century or whatnot. That may be true. I don't know. But I do know that's not Arab architecture right there. That's Greco-Roman. And it's done in a style that matches the pillar symbolism. Those are the pillars of the earth, the pillars of the world. It's all very much symbolic, but those pillars on actual architecture or Antiquitech can be used to redirect energy if it does come up through the architecture or come down through the architecture from above, right? So, same exact neoclassical style as we use today and have preserved, right? They even have a little staircase right in front. I don't know if you guys can see that. Maybe if I make it real small. Well, trust me, there's a little tiny staircase right there, right? No need for them to have made a staircase. They could just made it level with the ground. But, boom, you have the staircase or the unfinished pyramid that leads up to these little, pillars up there. Now let's take a look at these guys. This is Castor and Pollux. Say hello, Castor and Pollux.
Hello.
I'm just goofing around. Anyways, Castor and Pollux, right? The twin gods of ancient Greece. And they oftentimes were shown astride their horses. They were right next to their horses. Look how gigantic they are. Either they have tiny horses or ponies, or I don't know what those would be, or they were real big people, right? They're also wearing these are called Phrygian caps or Smurf hats. I like to call them Smurf hats. Take a good look at these Greco-Roman gods, which are akin to, what are those other two twins that founded Rome? The ones that suckled the wolf, remember? What's their names? Let's see, Castor and Pollux. Oh, Remus and Romulus, right? The same thing. To me, this the exact same thing. Now, take a look. And then let's go back to this structure right here. I want to zoom in. I want to show you something. Right? We've got Greco-Roman architecture, but then off to the sides, flanking the entryway, we have Castor and Pollux. They're all broken to pieces, but as you can see, they're standing right there. There would be a horse right behind them. This one's a little better. You can see his abs. Let me zoom in all the way. And that horse has like one of its front legs like up in the air, right? This is Castor. These are his abs. That's his little toga right there. You still think that this is Arabic in nature? I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, people will see what they see, but I see Castor and Pollux guarding the entryway as a form of Adam and Eve, Romulus and Remus, positive and negative, anode and cathode on either side of the entrance that goes down into the world, symbolically speaking, at the very least. The temple, there's a temple of Castor and Pollux as well. There was a cult of Castor and Pollux as well. You always have these beams, right? Oftentimes these columns and poles and pillars and rods. Here's another one built right into the mountain. Or clay formation. Like, you ever see those ancient structures and walls where it's, people love posting this on Facebook. They're like, look, it's seamless. It's like a hexagonal brick or something, and the other one fits it perfectly, and they seem to be like bulging out a little bit. Probably bulging out because they were like cooked or something over time. Anyways, I believe that those were less dense a long time ago. So they were easy to shape. All right. They were easier to move. They weighed less, right? Because of the increased buoyancy. They were easy to shape. And then they hardened over time, or whenever electricity was applied to them to change their bonds, to make them stronger bonds. Here's another one. Many people might see a melted building. There's definitely a building here, or a structure where people lived, right? I wouldn't argue that. And like I said, I believe that survivors carved out brand new houses. This is the easiest way to survive. You just carve your house out of clay. Just dig it on out. Sculpt it. You sculpt your own house. You don't have to go excavating and putting materials together and whatnot. It's all right there, and it will harden, and you can live there, right? So people made the mountains into houses. Now this is of interest as well. This is a relief, which is a fancy word for statue. This is a relief in Petra representing Zeus or Dionysus, but also identifiable as Dushara, the supreme god of the Nabateans. The Nabateans who built Petra, who built this rock formations here that suddenly seem to just disappear. Academics will tell you that they always have their reasons. They always say, "Oh no, they just mated with the Romans and then they just lost their identity or whatever over time." I don't know about that. Anyways, here you clearly have a Greco-Roman structure. You clearly have Greco-Roman gods that are guarding that structure. And then to top it all off, you have these reliefs that are found, like this of Zeus with the toga and all. Right? Our history is not what we have been led to believe. As a matter of fact, I would tend towards saying it's the exact opposite. That everything we have been taught, purposeful or out of ignorance, is a complete fabrication. That's the real fiction. And that's the real make-believe. But the things we dive into here on my channel that I like to talk about, I see the fiction as being fact, at least in the modern world. I see the ancient world as being magic and all the possibilities being available to us. Now let's talk about this next one. The lost Roanoke Colony. I'm not sure if it's Roanoke or Roanoke, but whatever. The lost Roanoke Colony. This is here in the United States before it was the United States officially, right? So there we have these settlers, and I'm going to actually get into right next when we talk about the Vikings. I'm going to talk about who actually, like, I'm going to talk about Columbus. I'm going to blast Columbus out of the water. The lost Roanoke Colony. Now, here's the story about this. This is very interesting. So you had this colony of settlers that came over towards like the Virginia area, the eastern United States. They settled. They stayed there. They built and dug out huge forts, star forts, just like this. And they settled and they populated this entire area, right? They decided we're staying here. That's what settler means. They settled down. They were there for about 5 years. When the people from across the ocean came back to check on them, bringing supplies and whatnot, everybody, every single one of these people from Roanoke was gone. Their supplies were also gone. Their entire camp was in a state of disarray. They were still there. All of their camp was fortified. Nothing had been moved out of the way. Nothing had been used as if they were attacked or anything. There's many theories about what happened to this little tribe of early Americans. The only evidence being that somebody says that they left this word, Croatoan, carved on a tree. And then another one was crow, written on the tree, C-R-O. And so everyone in the modern world's like, oh, there you go. They must have went to this nearby island called Croatoa or Croatoan or something like that. However, they're not there. Okay? They all disappeared. They all suddenly up and left with no sign of struggle, with no indication that there was any kind of a problem. They just abandoned their little village in 5 years. Could it be that somehow they knew about these signs that were popping up all over the world during the Dark Ages in the form of lights, terrestrial beams of energy that shoot up? Maybe they spoke with the natives. Maybe the natives let them know. Or maybe some of them knew. I don't know. But I have a feeling that many people up and left and went to the North Pole. Back to paradise. The Khmer Empire. Let's talk about the Khmer Empire. This is in modern day Cambodia. Right? I'm going to show you these structures. Megalithic, huge, wonderful temples, beautiful, ornate. The most popular one, obviously, being Angkor, right? Angkor Wat. The Khmer were the people that inhabited this place. They're just known as the Khmer. Angkor Wat, symbolism of the Khmer capital. Now these structures that they had at Angkor Wat, just look at it. It looks like it's meant to deal with electricity. If you look at capacitors and you know, you're familiar with electronics and stuff, you can almost see gigantic versions of little electronic pieces in the architecture, because they knew what they were doing. They were working with nature. They used the electric field that was right above them to draw it down, to get free energy from the earth, to draw it out of the ground and harness it and store it, or to pull it from the very sky. They didn't pay for it. I promise you that. They did not pay for electricity or magic or power or whatever, you know, people looked at it at the time. Now, in ancient Cambodia, these people also just up and left. Okay, all these people. That's the whole theme. These people all just left. They just disappeared. Poof. They're gone. They also have these places of power. They also have these exact same similar step pyramids with the little mini steps going up the sides and whatnot. Different forms, different styles, different flavors of them, but all for the same purpose. All across the world. This is in Cambodia. Remember the last ones we showed you? Cambodia, like if this was the map of the world, Cambodia is here, Mexico is here. They're on opposite sides of the world at the same time, building the same structures, right? Performing the same rituals and doing the same things. Because the same thing was happening the world across. The air was electrically charged to such a degree that people were wearing clothing designed to keep from being zapped by it, which we've also done videos about. This is straight out of the movies. This is why these kinds of movies that show background and scenery and whatnot like this are so compelling, are so interesting, that we fall in love with these. Why? Because it speaks to our heart. It speaks to my soul. When I see stuff like this, that right there, man, the depth, the intricate nature of it, the microchip look of it, right? Clearly, this is a sigil. Okay, a sigil is just directing energy. That's all it is. Witchcraft, spellcraft, wizardry, sorcery. Sigils are just conduits that are created to direct the flow of energy. Doesn't mean they're evil. Doesn't mean they're good. They're just tools. They just are. Okay, that's a sigil. That's an earth sigil, right? People, I can't say they built it purposefully. They knew what it was for. I feel oftentimes we collectively are affected subconsciously, that we have a collective subconscious. And I'm not the first to say any of that or anything that I've been saying. But I am a reminder, and I will continue to remind people, this acts as a microchip. It does the same thing as a microchip would do, which is to redirect energy and take energy to one place and then remove it and place it somewhere else. And there's also the flow of energy being the people that live in here too, right? The people that live in here are energetic themselves, so they also provide more energy to places like this. But you've got a double square out in the middle of the forest, waterways all over the place. Water was very important, because when dealing with electricity, you need abundant amounts of water to keep your equipment or your architecture cool. When you run electricity through things, it tends to get very hot. So oftentimes you'll see these megalithic structures near huge water supplies. Or if you want a modern example, CERN. CERN has like lakes and lakes of water nearby to keep it cool, right? If we went through an apocalypse tomorrow and survivors came to CERN and they discovered it and it's just a circle and they're like, oh my God, they made a huge circular building and there's all this water nearby. I wonder what that had to, you know what I mean? They would have to piece it together. Anyways, as you can see, the place is ruined. It's overgrown by nature. And this happens quickly, okay? You might see this tree and go, wow, that took thousands of years. No. As a matter of fact, the next video I'm about to do is going to be something along the lines of the most dangerous plants of the post-apocalypse, or I don't know, killer plants of the post-apocalypse, or whatever. But I'm gonna go back and touch on plants after the apocalypse, because the way plants act, and I know most people are, you know, not afraid of plants until you like encounter one that's poisonous or toxic or something. Then all of a sudden you get a little bit of fear. Ooh, buddy, you just wait until after the apocalypse. Plants are regaining the world. Plants first, animals second, monsters after that, and then humans last. We're going way back down on the food chain. But plants are going to go into overdrive with all the increase in oxygen in the atmosphere, less pressure and everything. Plants are going to grow at incredible rates of speed. And on top of that, you'll have the vapor canopy, right? They'll have vapor. The soil won't be dry. It will be nice and wet all over the place. So it's a perfect living condition for plants to just bloom suddenly so quickly that vines become dangerous because they can just grow and wrap around you just like that, because that's what they're inclined to do. We'll talk more about that in another video though. But as you can see, huge plants just growing all over these temple structures, taking over. There are movies about this, right? Some are extremely cheesy. So don't say I didn't tell you. A lot of the plant movies where they try to make plants look like scary, it's hard for us to grasp that concept unless you change your paradigm. If you change your perspective, then all of a sudden you develop a new respect for the plant world, I promise. So all these plants shoot up, they start overgrowing, the roots all over the ancient ruins here, just becoming a part of the structure itself. But these places are abandoned, just gone, just left. Everyone, look at the intricate detail in some of these buildings. Look at the artwork. Think of how much time went into this. I don't believe modern academic explanations of all the various reasons that they come up with as to why all of these places around the same period of time all just vanished. Here's a statue of Vishnu. So in ancient Cambodia, they had Hinduism and Buddhism, and the two main gods that were worshipped, there were many, but were Shiva and Vishnu. Shiva represents, I believe, the red plasma, the serpents that drop down from the sky. Okay. Vishnu represents that blue beam of terrestrial energy that shoots upward from the earth. Here you have Vishnu, and up here, I don't know if they know that or not, but this is actually a representation, from my perspective, of Shiva. Okay, this is the inverted dome at the top of the world with the circular structure. Looks like there's even little stars or something up here attached to it. And this is supposed to be like an umbrella, a dome shape, right? Protection from cosmic elements. And then outside of Angkor Wat, you have the seven-headed serpent, which harkens back to Septon Trio of the north. And this right here, I'm not sure what this is. Looks like some kind of lion or something. I forgot what they said it was. But anyways, guardians, right? Anytime I see these serpents, especially when they split off into multiple heads, that's plasma. To me, every time, that's plasma. The Hydra, I mean, all of the symbolism, you know, cut off one head and two more take its place. That's plasma does that. Electricity does that. Little spirals, filaments of plasma. That's what they do. They can easily just split off and into multiple. Now, let's get into Vikings and the Norse. We're talking about the lost tribes of Vikings who settled Greenland. In Greenland? So, the lost Greenlandinger. The lost tribes of Greenland. So, what happened was the Vikings, I'll just be general, the Vikings came over to Greenland and they settled Greenland, right? This is not a time when like there was no, like, it wasn't overpopulation. They're not like, oh man, there's too many people, we need to find more land. No, the population was extremely low. These were the lost tribes trying to find their way back home, trying to get back to the place of safety because they had been kicked out of Eden. All of them, they go by different names: Anasazi, Norse. I mean, there's, biblically speaking, there's 12 different ones, right? They all look different, they all seem different. So here we have another tribe from the north, and they go to Greenland. They're very close, actually. It says around 1,000 Viking explorers traveled hundreds of miles across the sea to North America. They set up at least one successful colony, only to completely abandon it soon after. So the question is, why didn't the Vikings stay? Why would you travel all the way across the world and just, set up shop for a couple years like the Roanoke Colony, and then just leave and abandon it and not be seen by anybody and just disappear off the face of the earth, unless that's not your destination, unless you're looking for paradise, unless you're trying to return to Hyperborea. I'm going to say that as many times as I can. I can't wait for you guys to check out my new book. So anyways, the Vikings came to Greenland, they set up shop, and then, they left a few megalithic structures, stone structures, some of their writing and whatnot, some houses, stone houses and, rubble all over the place. But the reason it's rubble is because of apocalyptic events, or cataclysmic events at the very least. That's why you see all this rubble all over the place, right? So they left Greenland. Now, Greenland is, if you look at the North Pole maps, right, of that circular island right at the middle of the world, at the top of the world, if you look at those maps, Greenland's touching it. Greenland touches paradise. It's almost touches it. It's so close. So I applaud them. I believe this little picture of the Skralinger, the dwarves that definitely live in Greenland and used to be they used to be so abundant. Everyone saw them. Everyone knew that there were dwarves. I'm not talking about midgets. I'm not talking about Eskimos, and I'll call them whatever I want to. Inuit, you know what I mean? I'm talking about tiny people. Tiny people. Not physically challenged or handicapped or anything crappy, stupid like that. I'm talking about actual tiny people that lived in Greenland. Now, they still have, their lore, their myths and whatnot. The Greenland people know who discovered their country. They know who set up shop. At least who were the last ones to do so. That would be the Norsemen, the Vikings. And they set up their stone buildings, and this was a stopping point. It was a waypoint until they saw the sign, until they found the sign. Now I imagine if you're in Greenland and you see all these little poles of the earth shoot up, terrestrial beams of energy, you're going to see Mount Meru in all of its splendor and glory, and you're gone. Grab the kids, grab, water or something, that's it, and go. It's time to go, you know what I mean? So that's the main reason why I believe all of these tribes disappeared. Like, so for example, up here in the middle of the world, you have the main beam of light that people would see. The further away you are, the more that main beam of light might actually start to blend in with the large beams that are local. So people could easily get confused if they don't actually live closer to the North Pole or in the Northern Hemisphere. Just like the people in the Four Corners or the Hopi. The Hopi saw a beam of light shoot up out of the Grand Canyon. If you read their stories, they saw a cosmic sign, just like the Aztec. I believe that they were looking for Mount Meru way up here. But when you're that far away, Mount Meru is a lot smaller. And it kind of blends in with local other beams of light. And you don't know which one to go to. Right? So they just settled in their little local area that had a beam of light. The Vikings go all the way across from Scandinavia and beyond over here to America. The early voyages began. The settlers of Greenland were led by Eric the Red, right, in the first thousand years, AD or BC, no 80. And then we have his son Leif Erikson. Now Leif Erikson lands over here in Canada, they say, right? Up there by like Maine, Newfoundland, or Newfoundland, you could say. They actually called it Vinland, or the land of vines. Maybe they were looking for a place, you know, that had lots of vines. The land of milk and honey, the land of wine, dark seas, and whatnot. So this is the area that allegedly where Leif Erikson landed. He discovered this land of North America 500 years before Columbus. The whole Columbus story is fiction, okay? It's a falsifying of history. It's leading you down the wrong path in the choose your own adventure. There's truth to it, as there is truth to all things, but it's not all true. This land has never been discovered by one person, not even Leif Erikson, okay? There was people here when he got here. All right, everyone wants to claim everything. Humans are so selfish. I don't want to focus on that too much, but damn, that's true. They're so selfish. I claim it. It's mine. I discovered it. I found it. It's mine. It's my idea. I brought it up first. Or whatever. I hear a lot of that on YouTube and little truther communities. Anyways, so Leif Erikson definitely got here way before Columbus did. But he didn't stay very long. Set up shop for a few years, and just like the Roanoke tribe, took off, disappeared. Was never heard from again. Allegedly. Let me read this little thing about Leif Erikson. His name, Leif, is exactly the same name as the survivor of Ragnarok. It is Leif and Leifthrassir, which is male and female respectively. They're basically the post-apocalypse version of Adam and Eve in Norse mythology. Leif Erikson, the son of Eric the Red, and brother of previously mentioned Freydis Eriksdottir. He is most notably known for being one of the first Europeans to set foot in North America. He was the first to establish a colony in what he later called Vinland. This is estimated to be somewhere in modern-day Newfoundland, Canada. He traveled to Norway, where he was converted to Christianity. Now, I also want to jump in and pause real quick. Christianity was way different back then. Okay, I don't want to get off topic, but it's not the modern, Protestant evangelical free, televangelist Christianity that many of you are used to. It was way different. Okay, he converted to Christianity. He traveled to Norway, converted, spreading his beliefs amongst the other Greenland Vikings. On his way back, he was blown off course and discovered some unfamiliar land. It has self-sown wheat fields and grapevines. He did make landfall there, and after a voyage back to Greenland, he returned to Vinland with a crew of 35 to establish a colony. To establish a colony, right? But then they disappeared. Something happened that motivated them to leave. Many other people will be like, oh no, they met locals and they just were overran. They were killed by locals. The colonies did not endure because meetings with the indigenous people were hostile. That's what they all say, right? I'm fairly local. I've been around. I seen the streets you're walking down. I'm fairly local. Oh, 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 oh. And that's our presentation. Vanished in the Dark Ages. Until next time, I'm JayDreamerZ saying good vibes and goodbye.
Time to wake up.